Hi, this is Chris from Chris Loves Crochet and Crochet Recreations. And this time I thought I would try to recreate the brim of a hat. So I have a kind of a series of graduation gifts that I've been making for my seniors at high school. I'm a teacher. And so using two colors to represent their college colors, I've been making some beanies and some snowboarder hats and things like that. And so one of my kids asked, hey, can you make a brim of a hat? He's a baseball player. And I said, I don't know. I'll try. So by using a tight stitch and doubling it over and without having to put anything in there for any sturdy construction, I think I did just that. So hang in there and I'll show you how it's done. And so the girls, it makes it pretty easy. You get their two main colors for their college, and since this snowboard hat that I have another tutorial out there for uses a double strand, I just use the two colors. And so I have the colors for their college in their hat, and I just use the two strands and to represent their college. For the boys, I've just been doing beanies and using their two colors and doing the main part of the beanie in one color and then a band in the second color. And here's one that folds up a little bit, or he can leave it down and however he wants to do it. But the colors for their colleges. I had somebody ask me today if he could have a brim on his hat. Not like a regular beanie, but like a brim, like what's on a baseball hat. So I remember seeing once with, whose channel was that? Marley Bird. She did a brim on a hat. And so I remember kind of what she did, and she did something that used slip stitches. And I tend to stitch way too tight to have any fun with slip stitches at all, trying to get back into it. And so I am going to show you how I'm going to do the brim using single crochet, but I'm going to use a size 4 weight worsted to go with. So here's a main color of a hat. Here's red. I'm going to start off showing you white, and then I'll show you how far I've gotten. Not that far, but well, I've gotten a little far on a gray that would go with the red. But I'll show you how I get started. So anyway, so you make a beanie, then you put it aside, and you get your stuff to make the brim. So I'm going to start with white. Now you could use a regular stitch marker and move it up each time, but if I'm going to be doing rows and rows or rounds and rounds or whatever, and I'm going to have to move it up, I would much rather use a contrasting yarn and just stitch it in that one stitch as I go up. That way I don't have to remove and attach and remove and attach, and it counts the rows for me too. So I'll show you how I use that. Now this is Loops and Threads Impeccable that I'm going to start with, and this is a number 4 weight, and it calls for a size 5 crochet hook, a size 5 H, size 5 millimeter, size H crochet hook. I'm not going to use the 5 millimeter. I'm going to put that aside. I'm going to use a 3.5. And for those of you who have done some amigurumi, we know that you use a little bit smaller of a hook and you get a much tighter stitch, and I think that'll help with the brim. Instead of using the slip stitches, using a single crochet with a smaller hook, a size and a half smaller, 1.5 millimeter smaller hook, then I'm going to get something that's tight enough that's going to be a brim. So that's what I'm going to do. Anyway, I'm going to start off with a slip knot, and then I'm going to chain 6 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And now I'm going to single crochet, and I'm going to single crochet. Oh, let me see if I can zoom in a little bit. I'm going to single crochet using these bumps on the back. And so on the second chain from the hook, not counting the one that's on the hook, so here's 1, and then there's 2. I turn it over, and I see the little hump on the back, little bump. And I am going to, if I can get my little hook in there, do a single crochet. So I'm going to end up with 5 single crochets on my first row. So there's 1, 2. Now I'm going to start in the middle. I'm going to have start with the stitch marker in the middle. So the way I put a stitch marker on is I put it down across the top of the working yarn so that it ends up in the top of the stitch. So before I go into the third, which is the center of the 5, the third stitch, I put that contrasting yarn on there, and I pull through and I do a single crochet. So on my first row, I have my stitch marker, my contrasting yarn, going through and showing me that that's the center stitch. So then I have 2 more on this row of 5. That's number 4. Ooh, and then this one's going to be tough. And that is number 5. Okay. So the reason I put it in the center is that that's where all the increasing and decreasing is going to happen, is in the center. Because this little piece is going to, and we'll see it later on, but it's going to fold over to be the brim. And so we're going to increase and increase and increase so that when we fold it over, we have one that starts smaller, goes bigger, and then comes back down, and have that brim shape. So it's just back and forth, but we're going to be increasing and decreasing in the stitch right before and right after our stitch marker here. So I've got 5, I'm going to chain 1, and I'm going to turn. And starting in that chain 1 is just a turning chain, it doesn't count as a stitch. Starting in that very first stitch there, I'm going to do 1 single crochet. And now here's my stitch marker. So the stitch I'm coming up to is the one right next to the stitch marker. So in that stitch, I'm going to increase. I'm going to put 2 single crochets in there. And then in the center, I want to keep moving up this yarn. So I'm going to take this contrasting yarn, my stitch marker, lay it over top the working yarn here, kind of between the working yarn and my hook. And then I go into the stitch, and I can aim for right where the yarn is on that previous stitch, because that's the top part of the stitch. That's where I work anyway. So I push through, and I try not to push my hook through this yarn, or it's a bear to get back out. So make sure that your stitch marking yarn is off to the side. Then you pull up a loop, yarn over, and pull through the 2. There's a single crochet in the center. So the one next to the center, on the other side of the center, I'm going to do an increase with 2 single crochets. And then I have 1 more to do, so I'm going to put in 1 more single crochet at the end. So now instead of 5 stitches, we have 7. It's kind of hard to see on white, isn't it? But we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 stitches. And so for each row, we're going to increase twice. So we're going to increase by 2 on each row. So I'll show you one more time. Chain 1 to turn, single crochet in the very first stitch, single crochet in the second stitch, Now we're coming up to the center. So we see where my yarn went through to show the center stitch. Here's the one right before the center stitch. So I'm going to increase there. I'm going to put 2 single crochet in here. Now I want to move up my stitch marker. So I take my yarn and I lay it across the working yarn, between the working yarn and my hook. Go in right where that stitch marker went in. Oops, and look, I went through the yarn. You don't want to do that or you end up with it inside a stitch. And so when you're trying to get it out, it causes a big mess. So make sure it's off to the side. And pull through and make your center stitch. And now to the left of center, we're going to do 2 stitches. We're going to do the increase. So 1, 2, and then we finish out our row. Got this one and then the last one. So now we started off with 5, then we had 7, plus 2 is 9. We have 9 here. And what I'm going to do is continue increasing back and forth and continue moving this up. If I want to end up with 25 stitches going across, I want to increase to 25, and I started with 5. We obviously need to add 20 more stitches. We add 2 per row. So we're going to add on top of the 5 on the first row, we're going to add 10 more rows. So each one of those 10 rows are going to add 2. Right? So 10 times 2 is 20, plus your 5 is you end up with 25. And then we have our brim. So I'm going to pause here and you can work up and keep moving this up, and this shows you how many rows you have. So you're going to have a total of 11 rows if we count your first row of 5. So wherever this yarn goes in or out, that's a good way to count too if you have a hard time counting the single crochet rows. So there's 1 row, 2 rows, 3 rows so far. And we want to end up with, since we're adding on to the first one, we're adding on 10 more, so that makes 11 rows. So now I have 25 stitches in the row, and you can see with the way that I have increased with each row, I just carry up this contrasting yarn, and I can go back and I can count every time it goes in or out, it's a row. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then it comes out here, and that makes 11 rows of increases. And then I did another row of 25 here. But this shows me where I stopped with the increases and how this is going to be a brim. Now we can kind of see it. If we fold it over like this, we have, put a hat here, we have a brim starting. So we're going to continue across here and then decrease down, and we'll have a double layer pretty tightly stitched with the single crochet and a 1.5 millimeter smaller hook. We'll have a brim, and so I'm putting it in the other color for this student's college. So it's red and silver, so I'm doing a gray to make the brim the other color. And I'm still toying with the idea of maybe making the gray somehow go all the way around. So I'll figure that out. But you can be creative with that. So, which is about 3 inches. I'm going to have 2 of these because I'm going to then decrease with the same thing on the other side. So how much of the brim do I want to be just straight stitches? Well, if I want it to be about 10 inches and I have 3 inches on one side and 3 inches on the other, that's 6. Right? So I need 4 inches of just straight, 4 to 5 inches of just straight 25 stitch rows. 25 single crochet rows. And as you go along, it gets a little bit straighter, not a lot, but it gets a little bit straighter as you go along. So what I'm going to do is continue up. I'm not going to move this up any so that I can measure from here to the 4 inches that I'm going to need to add. So from here, oh, you can't see it down there. So from here to the 4 inches of just straight 25s, and then I'll come back and you'll be at the same place, and then we'll do the decrease, which is just the same way, just backwards, and then we'll have a brim to attach. Okay, see you in a bit. Okay, I got a little worried about going too far and making too large of a brim, so I went ahead and stopped at 3.5. Is that right? 3.5. Well, that's different. About 3 inches of the straight 25 single crochet stitches. So what if I do it this way and measure? Is that what I was doing? I'm rambling again. Yeah, it's about 3.25. It's about 3.25 of just the straight part of the brim. And so now I'm going to start decreasing. So it did get straight, although, you know, it has this bump, but that's okay because it's going to be folded over and be the brim on the hat. So there's my hat. There's part of the brim. I just need this other little piece over here. And so I'm going to show you how to do the decrease. I got another piece of yarn, contrasting yarn. We need to, since there's 25, we need to stop at the 13th. On the 13th stitch is going to be the center stitch to put that one in. Excuse me. So we're going to chain 1 and turn and stitch 12. Three, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, golly, 9, 10, 11, there's 12. So now I want to put this yarn, contrasting yarn, the stitch marker, across my working yarn, between the working yarn and my hook. So I can put it in, have it inserted in the center stitch. So I'm going to do a single crochet over that piece of contrasting yarn. And I'm just going to finish this row without any decreases. Somebody's snoring behind me, and that wasn't me, that was my dog. One of my puppies. So we've got one more row, looks like, of straight stitches. Chain 1, turn. Now we know where our center stitch is. So once we get, now we're going to have to keep an eye out for 2 before the center stitch, because we're going to be decreasing, so we're going to be single crocheting 2 together. So we need to have those 2 together. So I chained 1, I turned, I'm going to stitch over about 10, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, again, and that leaves me with 2 stitches here before I get to the center stitch that's marked. So these 2, I'm going to do 2 single crochet together to decrease. Then I do 1 in the center stitch, marking it by pulling that yarn over the working yarn and under the hook. So, and then I put my hook in where that yarn went through. Careful not to go through the yarn on the other side, and do a single crochet. Now, since I'm on the other side of that center stitch, I'm going to do 2 single crochets together to do a decrease. So I've got 3 loops on the hook, yarn over and pull through all 3. So we've made those 2 into 1 stitch. And then I finish. Yes, that's PM. I should be asleep. Chain 1, turn, do the same thing again, and go up till I have 2 before my center stitch, so I can crochet a decrease by putting 2 single crochets together. And this I will keep on doing until I get down to 5. Yeah, until I get down to 5. I don't know why I just stopped. Okay, so I've got 3, so I need 1 more. So I have 2 stitches here before the center. 2 single crochet together. Make those 2 into 1. Do 1 single crochet in the center, not hooking my stitch marker yarn. Oh, you know what I didn't do? I didn't mark it. I'm going to mark it. I need to put that across there. Do a single crochet over it. And now another decrease of 2 single crochet together. Make those 2 into 1, and then finish this row. So I'm going to keep doing this until I get down to a row of 5 like I have over here. And so I'm going to do, so my last row is going to have the 2 decreases in it, but it's going to be 5 total. So I'm going to continue to decrease until I have that. So here we have the last little piece of the brim done. And I did not cut off, I did not fasten off, because I'm going to use this to attach it to my beanie. So it's already kind of halfway folded by the way that it is stitched. Now we don't need these stitch markers anymore, so I'll show you. As long as you don't stitch right through them, then they pull right out. So we've got our 11 stitches here too, and we can count with the stitch marker thread that we have 11 decrease rows. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So we know that we're right, and we ended up with 5 stitches here with our decreases, and so we know that both sides are the same. So we just pull this one out. Boom, like that. So now we have our nice little brim folded over. So I find the front of the hat. Here's the back of the hat. Find the front of the hat. It doesn't have to be perfect, so you don't have to like regularly do any counting to find it. But so about in the center here. I'm going to start on the side. Do this. Start on the side, on the right side, so make sure that your working yarn is on the right side, right hand side. and put it just under the brim of the hat. Now this would work better probably if I took the time to make a single crochet row around here, but I'm not going to. I'm going to do that after I attach it around the rest of it, I think, with the gray. So I'm going to take what I have. I need to pull this thread up to the top, so I'm going to find a place, put my hook through that stitch, make sure that this is folded correctly, put my hook through the very first stitch here, the first of the 5. We're going to start right there so we don't have any little corners peeking out. And then the first of the 5 on this side, loop over our working yarn, pull that tight down on my hook. So now I'm just going to be drawing it through carefully. These 2 stitches on the brim, I still have my hook on my hat, and I have my yarn on my hook. I'm going to pull that through the hat, through that stitch. Now I'm going to take my hook and go through the next stitch. Try to make sure that I'm staying down here on the bottom. And now this is the raw edge of the brim. So it's not really it's a stitch, but it's at the edge of the stitch. And it's probably going to be, since these are a little bit wider stitches than these really tight single crochets, it's probably going to be every other single crochet, which is kind of like, you know, these 2 single crochet rows together come together as like an X. So it's in the ridges here. So I'm going to put my hook through here on the bottom. Make sure I get through both sides all the way to the back in that bottom part. Pick up the stitch, pull it through. I've got 2 stitches on my hook. I'm going to do a slip stitch. So I'm going to take this stitch and pull it through the first loop on my hook. Give it a little bit of space, not too much because we don't want it to be loose. My nose itches. And go to the next stitch. And we're going to do the same thing. We're probably going to skip a little bit, find some place that works, push our hook through, pull the yarn up, pull it through the hat. So we've got 2 loops on our hook. Take the first loop, pull it through that second loop. And we keep doing that, making sure that we don't just start moving up on the brim because it fits in there so nicely. You know, this hat is curved, and so we need to make sure that we continue on the appropriate edge. Oops. Yeah, that's right. Of the brim. So we've got 2, and we'll do a slip stitch. I get all of it and I split it. Pull it through a little bit. Go to the next one. Put your hook through. Go under here. Find a spot. Push it through both sides. We're still on the edge. Take the yarn. Pull it through. And then pull it through the hat. Split it again. It's a splitty yarn. Or it's a splitty crocheter. I don't know which. And then do our slip stitch on the top here. So I'm going to do that across and I'll be right back. So I'm here almost to the end, and just make sure as I was going along with my brim, it started to get a little bit out of order. So I need to make sure, we need to make sure that we've got these last 5 stitches lined up very carefully so that our brim doesn't get a little wonky. And we pull through. And then on this last one, we want to make sure that we go through the first stitch of the 5. On each side, so we don't have a little corner sticking out. So we pull through like that. So we've got our slip stitch. It wasn't all even tension. Oh well. All the way across, and we have our little brim on our hat. So what I'm going to do now with this gray is to kind of, maybe I'll go up to a 4.5, because I don't want it to be like really tight. So I'm going to pull this loop up a little bit, put the 3.5 aside, get out 4.5. And I'm going to single crochet from here around to the other edge of the brim. So in doing so, I'm going to take this tail that's left over from the brim, and I'm going to sew that in. And I'm going to start with this very next stitch. Go under, pull up a loop with my single crochet with my 4.5 millimeter crochet hook. Put that tail in a few. I need to leave a little bit of space so that I can sew it back a couple more times. And I'm just going to single crochet around to the end. And there she is. So we've got the brim on here, attached with a slip stitch here, and then I continued around with the gray, a single crochet with, instead of the 3.5 millimeter crochet hook, I used a 4.5 millimeter crochet hook, and it still did, it tightened it in a little bit, which is good because this was a loose beanie. I think I did it in double crochet. So it goes all the way around, and that gives us our finishing touch on the edge of the beanie so that it will stay on. And then we have a little visor brim to keep the sun out of their eyes. In our nice little college colors, so it's another great gift for those high school grads that are going on to college, and you want to support them in their college colors. You can do a hat like this for the boys, oh, even for the girls. Come on. You can do one of those snowboarder hats with the double strands and use the 2 colors for the college. There are lots of different scarves that are done with 2 different colors, that you can find some of those to make with their college colors, and to celebrate and to say, yay, good job, and keep going, and support them in their future endeavors. So that's my intent in doing this for my students. They worked so hard. So that's a hat with a brim. I hope you enjoyed it. And remember, we always have a choice, so choose happy.